I absolutely love tomatoes in any way, shape, or form. If you didn't know, they're a super concentrated source of glutamic acid, which is just MSG, making them an easy way to incorporate more flavor into your cooking. Now, since it's tomato season, one of my favorite times of the year, I'm going to show you 3 levels of tomato recipes, ranging from an easy dish you can make at home in a rush to something that I'd be proud to serve in a nice restaurant. For my level 1 tomato dish, I'm going to be making one of my childhood favorites, stir-fried tomato and egg. As I've gotten older, I really appreciate how simple ingredients come together to make a harmonious dish that is truly better than the sum of its parts. And it's even better when it only takes 15 minutes. We're gonna start with lightly scoring 3 regular old field tomatoes in an X-patter and pouring boiling water over them. Let them sit for about 30 seconds, then peel off the skin. This step is totally optional if you're in a rush, but it yields a more tender final product. Then chop the tomatoes into wedges. I'm cutting them in an oblique pattern by turning the tomatoes slightly after every cut so that the watery flesh stays intact. Peel a knob of ginger using a spoon, then cut it into matchsticks. Or if you want to be fancy, call it a julienne. Now beat together 2 eggs and preheat a wok over medium heat. You can just use a pan if you don't have one. Coat the wok in oil, then scramble the eggs. Set it aside once it's done. Still over medium heat, add the tomatoes and ginger. Now season with a pinch of salt, a tablespoon of sugar, and a teaspoon of chicken powder to amp up the savoriness. Turn the heat down and cook for about 4 to 5 minutes until the tomatoes are broken down to your desired consistency. Now take a teaspoon of cornstarch and dissolve it in a tablespoon of water. Add that to the tomatoes to thicken the mixture. Turn off the heat once it's thickened to your liking and add back the eggs. Taste for seasoning and now it's ready. I like to eat it with rice, but it's great on its own as well. And that's how you make stir-fried tomato and egg. Oh, I wish you could smell this. Just like Mama used to make. For my level 2 tomato dish, I'm going to be making tomato soup. But not just any tomato soup. I'm making a gochujang infused roasted tomato and garlic soup that's paired with a perilla kimchi grilled cheese. There's something about Korean flavors that pair so well with tomatoes. I'm using Roma tomatoes for this since they're fleshier and have a strong acidity. Start by slicing 4 tomatoes in half, then placing it on a baking sheet. Add a head of garlic with the top removed and give everything a generous coating of olive oil. Season with salt and pepper and roast them at 350 Fahrenheit for 45 minutes. You want the garlic and tomatoes to be softened and fully cooked through. In the meantime, make a mirepoix by peeling and dicing half an onion, half a carrot, and a stick of celery. Don't worry about the consistency of the cuts because everything will be blended later. In a pot over medium heat, add a healthy amount of olive oil and sweat your mirepoix until the edges are translucent, about 3 to 4 minutes. Then go in with a heaping tablespoon of tomato paste and cook it until it darkens, making sure to constantly stir so it doesn't burn. Now comes the fun part. Get a lighter or torch ready, and maybe some safety goggles if you haven't done this before, just to make sure you still have eyebrows afterwards. Then add a 1/4 cup of brandy and release your inner pyromaniac. Constantly stir or swirl to burn off the alcohol, which will take about 30 seconds. Once that's done, go in with 2 cups of vegetable stock or just water. Then tie together a few sprigs of thyme and a bay leaf with butcher's twine and throw it in the pot. Bring it to a simmer and let it cook for about 10 to 15 minutes. By that time, your tomatoes and garlic should be done and we're ready to blend. Add your stock mixture into a blender, following up with the roasted tomatoes and garlic. Blend that up until nice and smooth. Then add half a cup of heavy cream, 1 tablespoon each of balsamic and red wine vinegar, and a heaping tablespoon of the signature ingredient, gochujang. Give that a blend and season to taste with salt. Then pass it through a chinois for a silky smooth texture. Now you can't have tomato soup without grilled cheese. After grating the cheddar, layer a healthy amount onto the bread. I also added some perilla kimchi which I had lying around. By the way, I have a video for that on my shorts feed which I'll also link in the description. Spread a healthy amount of butter on the bread and toast that baby until bronzed and beautiful. Like you after a day at the beach. Make sure to cut your grilled cheese into triangles or I will find you. Now garnish the soup with just a touch more olive oil and a sprig of basil for health of course. This soup was so tasty and the gochujang gave it just the right amount of heat. The perilla kimchi inside is next level. Good soup. For my level 3 tomato dish, I'm making a pasta dish where I'm infusing tomatoes into every single component. This is tomato prezi and gnocchi with a tomato butter sauce and dehydrated heirloom tomatoes dusted with tomato powder. I'm going to start by making tomato water as the base of my tomato butter sauce. Start by roughly chopping 500 grams of tomatoes and half an onion. Add 5 grams of salt and blend until coarsely puree. Pour it into a cheesecloth lined sieve and let it drain in the fridge for at least 8 hours or overnight. Once that's done, we're left with tomato pulp and tomato water. Prep the dehydrated heirlooms by thinly slicing heirloom tomatoes using a sharp knife and placing on parchment. Throw it in a dehydrator at 140 Fahrenheit along with the tomato pulp for about 10 to 12 hours. And yes, this recipe takes a long time. Now place the tomato water in a pot and bring it to a simmer. Reduce it by half, which should yield about 150 grams. Then while blending, add 120 grams of cold cubed butter, 1 cube at a time. Once the butter is emulsified, Season with half a teaspoon of salt and sugar and 1 teaspoon of sherry vinegar. Then add about a quarter teaspoon of xanthan gum to stabilize the sauce. I'm going to split the sauce with a basil perilla oil. Make it by blending 25 grams each of basil and perilla leaves with 100 grams of neutral oil until it's a pasty consistency. Then place that in a pot over medium-low heat and simmer for 15 minutes until it's dark green. Then transfer it to a bowl over an ice bath and cool it down. Strain it through a cheesecloth lined sieve and we have our basil perilla oil. For the tomato powder, take the dried tomato pulp and grind it to a fine powder using a spice grinder. We'll use this to season our dehydrated heirloom tomatoes. With all that out of the way, we can make the Parisian gnocchi, which is the French version of gnocchi that's made with choux pastry dough instead of potatoes. And I'm sorry Italians, but I do prefer the French version. Start by pureeing 50 grams of tomatoes, then adding that to a pot with 180 grams of water and 100 grams of butter. Bring that to a boil and immediately go in with 175 grams of all-purpose flour while stirring vigorously. Once the dough starts to pull away from the sides, turn off the heat. At this point you can throw it in a stand mixer to finish, but I stupidly decided that I had too much energy and wanted to finish it by hand. Incorporate 1 ounce of grated parm, then add 3 eggs, 1 egg at a time, making sure it's fully combined before the next. Your arm should be burning at this point. Then add 1 teaspoon of finely chopped basil and 3 grams of salt to season. Place the finished dough in a piping bag and let it rest for 20 to 30 minutes before using. After the gnocchi dough is done resting, bring a pot of salted water to a boil. Snip off the end of the piping bag to about ½ inch or 1 centimeter in diameter and pipe out the dough. With a wet knife, cut pillows of dough into the boiling water. Once the gnocchi floats, it's done. It takes about 2 to 3 minutes. At this stage, you can store the gnocchi in the fridge for a few days. Now we're ready to put it all together. In a pan over medium heat, add a pat of butter and sear off the gnocchi about 1 to 2 minutes aside. Plate the gnocchi with dehydrated heirloom tomatoes dusted with tomato powder and garnish with basil leaves. Then mix half a cup of tomato butter with 3 tablespoons of basil perilla oil and gently mix to split the sauce. Spoon the sauce around the dish and there you have it. Tomato Parisian gnocchi with tomato butter, dehydrated heirlooms, and tomato powder. It's 2 days later and we finally finished the level 3 tomato dish. It took so much effort, but I'm so excited for this. If I had a restaurant, I'd probably do something like this during tomato season. Now, time for the moment of truth. That is rich. I need a moment. Oh my god, that's just so good. Salty, sweet, acidic umami, it has it all. I'll maybe go a little less on the tomato powder next time. But, wow, that's so good. If you make this for a date, it's game over. Well, thanks for watching. Now you have 3 new tomato dishes in your arsenal. Don't forget to like and subscribe.